In the world of politics on this Thursday morning, a lot going on. City Hall in crisis. January 6 hearings start again today, and the midterms now just weeks away, believe it or not. Caroline Heldman, professor of critical theory and social justice at Occidental College, here to discuss it all. Good morning, Caroline.
Good morning, Giselle. Great to see you.
Great to see you as always. Oh, we have to start with local politics, don't we? Los Angeles still reeling from the incendiary, painful comments by council members Mary Martinez, Kevin De Leon, and Gil Cedillo. Even the President of the United States weighing in. How big a reckoning for Los Angeles?
Well, it's a national news story, and it has dominated the news politically for a couple of days. This is obviously a moment for Los Angeles to reflect and consider this idea of inclusion and liberal politics when you have such homophobic, racist, and anti-Indigenous comments happening on a phone call.
So this was all about redistricting, right? The AG now launching an investigation. So what do we expect from this? What kind of look at redistricting can kind of shed some light on how we can repair things here?
Well, Attorney General Bonta is going to look to see whether or not the comments that were made actually translated into bias in terms of districts. There are a lot of ways you can bias redistricting, and it's really vital that it be done fairly because you're talking about who gets resources. So different parts of Los Angeles could have fewer resources simply because of if this bias translated into how they drew the districts. And we'll know that soon with this investigation.
All right. Now, both candidates for L.A. mayor called for the resignation of all three of the council members. Whoever it is will have quite a mess to clean up at City Hall, right? So how does this scandal impact the mayor's race?
Well, both of the candidates, Caruso and Bass, have come out and said essentially the same thing. They've asked all three members to resign. Mary Martinez has stepped down from the city council as well as the labor leader who is on the call. The question is whether De Leon and Cedillo will also step down. There are many calls for that. They've also, both of the mayoral candidates, have also called for an independent redistricting commission. So I'm suspecting it will be a bit of a wash because they're both, proposing the exact same response to this national news story.
Yeah, and it's just unfolding. So turning now to the midterms, just weeks away, polls show the GOP with a slight edge. But filmmaker Michael Moore, who predicted Trump's wave in 2016, says ignore those polls. A blue tsunami is on the way. What do you think?
Well, I think the fact that we're even talking about Democrats having any leverage in this election means that we're already seeing a major shift. And, Michael Moore, I think, is right in the sense that we actually don't know the effects of Roe. A lot of political pundits and commentators are treating the overturn of Roe as any other policy. They're comparing it to inflation, for example, which is temporary. But for millions of Americans, this cuts at the heart of their basic standing and value in the United States. And I just don't think we can predict it. I'm there with Michael Moore, that I think we're going to see turnout really driven by the overturn of Roe amongst Democrats in November.
Do you think California's vulnerable seats, 5 vulnerable congressional seats, could decide control of the House?
It could. I mean, all the Republicans have to do is flip 5 seats, and if Democrats can actually flip some in California, which it looks increasingly likely they will do, it could decide the balance of power. There are a lot of other races in play, as you know, 435. So in California, the 5 seats that could possibly move from Republican to Democrat, again, are being driven by Roe, really by the first proposition on the ballot, which 69% of Californians support, which is enshrining Roe or abortion rights in the Constitution. So, for example, Mike Garcia, Republican incumbent, needs to be worried about that being on the ballot the same time people are going in the voting booth to cast their votes.
Right. Just weeks away now. All right, January 6th committee hearing resumes today. More damning evidence expected against the former president. This is likely the finale. Has it made a difference? Will it make a difference?
Well, it hasn't shifted hearts and minds in terms of folks who thought that Donald Trump should have been indicted right after the violent insurrection of January 6th. But it's seriously provided information to the Department of Justice and Americans who've been watching this. This will be the closing arguments, and they have saved a lot of damning evidence for last, mostly Secret Service evidence that perhaps they obtained over the summer, so maybe they weren't holding out, but they just got this information that really speaks to Trump's state of mind, and it will demonstrate what we already sort of know, but in concrete terms, that Donald Trump knew that there was escalating violence and that he was pouring gasoline on that fire.
Right. And the Supreme Court deciding many cases of significance, but one would allow state legislatures to overrule the popular vote. How dangerous is that?
It will be the end of free and fair elections as we know it. We don't know precisely how it will play out, but the mechanics are that it, for example, would allow, like the 7 states that had fake elector slates, it would allow state legislatures to actually put in their own elector slate and send them to DC to vote in the Electoral College. In other words, override the popular vote in the state. And, this is something that the state Supreme Courts could not check. So, Giselle, I can't understate the importance of this case in terms of preserving free and fair elections.
That's right. And there are other cases with equal significance. Before I let you go, I have to ask you about Vladimir Putin unleashing this new onslaught against civilians, including what's called kamikaze drones. What's the end game here for Putin and this war? Is it going to end anytime soon? Will Putin be ousted? What do you think is going to happen?
Well, we've certainly entered a new phase where Putin is getting more desperate in response to the bombing of the Crimean Bridge. He, as you know, authorized attacks with drones and missiles in 10 major cities. And what he did is he attacked civilian targets. Obviously, these are places where Russian troops are not on the ground, so he's using air power. A lot of this is a propaganda campaign to show his people in his country that he's still, quote unquote, winning the war. He is not. And I would anticipate that as we get closer to the end of this war, whenever that may be, Putin will escalate the violence in ways that we can't imagine, as he has done in the past week.
All right, Caroline, thank you so much for lending us always your vital voice. Caroline Heldman, professor of critical theory and social justice at Occidental College. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, Giselle. Have a great day.
You too. We'll be back, everyone.